There are basically many companies, basically companies that make the chips, make scanners as well. So there are many scanners available. The universal scanners are the ones that most places have, and these scanners then pick up whatever company's chip. These scanners will pick up any frequency of chip that is put into the animal, and so then this, basically you hit a button and picks up. This then has a number, and that number has been put on. Once the animal is chipped and this has been implanted, the person then goes onto various databases. The American Kennel Club has something called Companion Animal Rescue, and that is a database that has where you go in and pay a certain fee, and then you put your animal's number in there, and you put any information that you want, your name, the person who is your veterinarian perhaps, or somebody else that you would want to have contact if your animal gets lost. So then if a person brings an animal, like we'll have an animal that someone has found, they bring them in, we scan them. We then have this list of 800 numbers, which is this particular list happens to be put out by Home Again, but again, these numbers are available online. And these are phone numbers that we contact then to say, we have an animal with this particular number, who does this animal belong to? And so say the person's on vacation and you're not able to reach the person, well, there'll be a secondary person, that is the person that we then contact. Or their veterinarian. We will also keep animals for a person, for a client. If they happen to be our clients, the animals will then get to stay with us until the people come back from vacation, and then we just notify them that we have their animal. So it keeps the animals safe. It also keeps the animals from being euthanized. The other sad thing is very sad when animals are not chipped and they get to a shelter and they're there for their allotted amount of time. And some shelters, as we all know, some shelters are very crowded, especially in these economic times. And so these animals, unfortunately, don't have a way to be, or a place to be for any long period of time, and they'll get euthanized. When they're chipped, they won't. They will not euthanize animals that are microchipped because they will have the time to spend, or they will find a way to get this animal to the owner. That is, as long as the people keep their information updated.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So when would somebody need to update their information? Anytime
anything has changed. That can be your veterinarian that's changed, your phone number that's changed, anything, any of the information on there. If the person that you want as your secondary contact has changed, you want to make sure you update that, because once again, most of the time people lose their animal is when they are traveling. If they travel with their animal and the animal gets loose, and then they're traveling, so there's no way to contact that person because you don't know where the dog will show up, the dog or cat will show up, so you can't call the vet's office that you think the animal will be at and say, this is where I am. The animal will now show up someplace, and a lot of times it's at animal control. They will scan the animal, they will have the number, they will call the 800 numbers, they will get the contact information, and if you've put your primary in but you haven't updated your secondary and your secondary happens to have moved, then they have no way of contacting. So that's why it's always important to make sure that they know your veterinarian, because then there's usually a way to say, okay, we know the owner, we can contact the veterinarian anyway. That generally stays the same. And if we contact the veterinarian, they may say, okay, that owner might just be on vacation, because a lot of times us as vets, we know that the people are taking them on vacation. We're writing the health certificates for them.
Well, actually, I know that I didn't even realize that you needed to update it, update your stuff. And I was just talking to you earlier, and I realized that I've got to update her information because our phone number did change, and heavens, you know, we wouldn't want anything. And she got microchipped, and she is just, in fact, you tested her, and it was so cool that it actually did show up. But you did say that, do you know, I mean, how many people do you think really feel positive about getting their animals microchipped? Do you find that they're hesitant to do that?
I think people are getting used to this idea. We've been microchipping animals for, I've been in practice for 20 years or over 20 years, and we've been
Gosh, you don't look that old.
I have, and we
Are you kidding?
Thank you. We've been microchipping for at least 10 to 15 years, and so originally people thought this was a little strange. I mean, think about this. Your animals now have something that gives sort of like a barcode. It is a strange thing, but it is better than tattooing because those tattoos, as the animal ages, the skin kind of distorts the numbers, so that's hard to read. So that didn't work. And so people are getting more used to it, I think, unfortunately, as things like Hurricane Katrina that hits the country and causes this widespread disaster, and then all those animals that were not microchipped, that were lost and never found their owners, that it hits home a little bit more with people to realize that this is not something that is strange or silly. It is really important, and it is an incredibly wonderful way to make sure that your animal stays with you.
Well, you know, it's a very good point, because I am part of Pet Alert, And so I get an alert every time a pet is picked up. And some of them, they say, okay, no chip, or microchipped, found owner, no chip, no chip. And I think, oh my heavens, please microchip your pets. In fact, Bowie Claw is in the process. That's one of the things we want to eventually do, is do a microchipping clinic to help get. This is one of the things we're trying to protect Bowie residents and their pets.
Right. It's very, very important. It is, like I say, it's the way that you can be sure that your animal comes back to you. It's also another way that, you know, on the flip side of this, if somebody were to steal your dog and you're sure that person stole your dog, if you have a purebred dog or just a dog that somebody really likes and they want to walk, we've actually, one of our staff members had a purebred Himalayan that happened to get out of her house, and somebody took it and said it was theirs, and she said it's mine, and they said it was theirs, and it had a chip.
Wow.
So she could prove that it was theirs. Now, whether they were doing it on purpose, no one really knows. But the bottom line was that we could prove that the cat was actually theirs because the cat was chipped.
Wow.
So we could say, nope, Tony is hers. So
excellent.
Yeah, it really is incredibly important to maintain the safety of your animal.
I think that's very good. So definitely, guys, really check into doing the microchip, right?
Yeah, I think that there's other things that need to be done. I
Absolutely.
mean, still put out the signs, the lost, and call the shelter, because a lot of times people don't take an animal to a shelter that they find. They end up holding on to it, and of course they don't have the scanner.
And you know what else? Because we were recently going on a dog hunt. Call the local vets and emergency clinics, because if they pick up an injured dog, they're not going to take it to the shelter. They're going to hopefully be a good Samaritan and take it to an emergency clinic.
Or if they got hurt, they'll take it to an emergency clinic, and there is a Good Samaritan Act that the emergency clinics will treat the animals and stabilize them, and that is not a cost to the person who finds this animal.
I did not know
that.
So
you can bring in an animal that has been hurt, and they will take care of and stabilize it.
Nice.
And they will scan, and we'll scan. Everybody has scanners. That's a veterinarian. I understand people are reluctant to bring them to shelters because then they don't want the animals put to sleep, and they have to say they found it and it's a stray, and so then it becomes a little bit sticky for people. But veterinary clinics won't do that. We don't. We basically, if you're willing to house the animal, then we'll make sure the animal is healthy, and we'll scan it for you. So it is very important.
Carson is doing great. Did we introduce Carson? Carson, this is Carson.
That's why she turned that way, because you didn't.
I know, Carson doesn't like me anymore. This is Dr. Martin's doggy, Carson, and Carson is microchipped.
Yes, Carson is microchipped, definitely.
Yeah, so is Abigail. Okay, all right, so great. So microchipping is definitely a plus, but there are so many other areas that we want to cover, and another one is very, very serious. Extremely serious, and that is about rabies and rabies vaccines. Everybody should have their pets inoculated against rabies. If you get rabies, there is no going back, and it's extremely serious. And I know Bowie has recently has evidence of a cat that had rabies. I'm not going to go into what kind of cat it was. It doesn't matter, but the cat had rabies. So we want to talk about rabies and about the frequency that you give rabies to a dog or a cat or whatever. So help me here.
Okay, when an animal is a puppy or a kitten, when they're young, under 4 months old, they just start their series of their distemper shots and their various what we call kind of shots that are basically good for protection of the animal. Rabies is something that is actually protection for the animal and protection for us. So it has to kind of be thought of as something that isn't just protecting your animal, it is protecting your family as well, because you don't want your dog to get it, because it is something that you will get from your dog. So when they start out, they're very young. You can't rabies vaccinate them until they're 4 months old. In the state of Maryland, they have to be 4 months old to be rabies vaccinated. And that first vaccine that they get is good for 1 year. Then in a year, they'll get another vaccine, and that is good for 3 years. And they just need to be boosted every 3 years. It is incredibly important to rabies vaccine. If you can afford to do nothing else for your animal, do a rabies vaccination. They do have cases of rabies. There are cases of rabies in cats. There are cases of rabies in raccoons. There are in fox. We see plenty of rabies in this area of the country. So it's something that is very easy to protect your animal for, and rabies vaccines are not terribly expensive and incredibly important.
And again, Bowie Claw, that's one of the things that we're going to be trying to implement eventually. That's one of our goals, is to do a low-cost rabies clinic and the other low-cost vaccinations. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.